Well, if we're just moving along the line, I guess it's my turn. Thank you for the invitation, first of all, to come and speak, and congratulations on your impeccable timing. We're having this debate on the day when both the British and Scottish cabinets are up in Aberdeen talking about how great it is to have an oil and gas industry and competing with each other to say who's going to give the biggest tax breaks to the oil and gas industry, who's going to be the most pro-fossil fuel government that we could have. Will it be Scotland or will it be Britain? Whichever way we vote, we're being told that our future is fossil. It's a pretty dispiriting scene to witness, that kind of fawning over the fossil fuel industry that's coming from both governments, because neither the Scottish nor the UK government, and I don't just mean the current ones, the current political leaders, I mean at any point in time, neither has ever got its head around the imperative of demand reduction, of reducing our dependence on oil. You've heard a great deal in the first presentation about one of the reasons why we need to do that. Climate change. It is our current consumption of fossil fuels is one of the key factors contributing to a gamble that we're currently conducting, a roll of the dice. How long can we maintain environmental conditions that are not only benign for our economy but even habitable on this planet? How long can we keep the life support system of the planet going while continuing to emit greenhouse gases into the atmosphere? And there's a range of calculations, possibly up to 80% of the fossil fuel we have. A range of different figures that you can get. How much more fossil fuel do we already have in the existing reserves that we can afford to burn if we're serious about climate change? We know that it's a substantial chunk. It could be 80% that we're going to have to leave unburned. Now that doesn't mean unused. It doesn't mean that none of that can be turned into an economic resource, because even after we've burned all the oil, we're going to have to ask questions about where the plastic comes from, where all the other chemical feedstocks come from. There's a huge amount of other petrochemical uses for our hydrocarbons than just fuel. And so a great deal of it is going to be dependent on two questions. How much do we choose to leave in the ground? And how much can we redirect to other non-fuel uses that our economy does still need? And you also get questions of ownership. In whose interests are those decisions being made? Who's actually profiting from the continuation of those industries, even if that happens within ecological limits? Let's imagine, though, for a moment that the climate change issue wasn't happening. That Donald Trump was right and it's all a communist conspiracy. Or Nigel Farage was right and we can just ignore it and carry on with business as usual. Let's imagine that climate change wasn't happening. I would argue that there is still a very strong reason why we should be moving away from oil and gas, divesting not just as an institution like a university, but as a whole economy, divesting as a species from the oil and gas industry. And that is that it simply won't last forever. Even a fossil fuel producing economy like Scotland, we can see that the fossil fuel production from the North Sea peaked in '99. It is never going to go back to where it was in those days and before. It may bump up and down a wee bit, but it's on a generally downward trajectory. And as we see prices rising around the world for a declining supply of fossil fuels, while developing countries, rapidly developing countries, continue to increase their consumption, and as Scotland becomes a net importer if we don't reduce our demand, we are not going to be protected from the shocks that come from that. We are not going to be, high prices will come to hit Scotland's economy rather than help Scotland's economy as we go from an exporter to an importer of fossil fuels. And so even if it wasn't for climate change, the imperative is still urgent we need to use less of it. We need to need less of it. We need to shift our whole economy away from a reliance on consuming fossil fuels. And that's not just about how we move about and how we produce electricity. It's about how we structure our whole economy. There's nobody in this room, I'd be prepared to bet, who isn't wearing clothes that arrived in a shipping container. There's nobody in this room who doesn't use products on a daily basis that arrived on these shores in a shipping container. Our whole economy, globally, is hooked on oil, and the need to divest our economy from that reliance, our need to move away from that reliance is urgent, both in terms of supply and the addiction that our economy has, but also the climate change argument. Actually, when you put the two together, you create an even stronger imperative as to why we need to break this reliance that we have. Because the fossil fuel industry is valued, the companies that make it up are valued on the basis of their known reserves. Now, if we were in a world in which we could turn all of those existing reserves into economic value, either as fuel or other petrochemical uses, then fair enough, it might be justifiable to value the industry on the basis of its reserves. But if you add in the climate change argument, if you recognise that not all of that resource can be turned into economic value, then what we're looking at is a profoundly overvalued industry. What we're looking at is a carbon bubble. Because either we're going to burn all and screw up the ecosystem that we depend on, or we're going to leave a good chunk of it in the ground, in which case this industry is not worth what it's currently being valued at. And so it's a bad investment, even in terms of the single bottom line that people often look at. The banker with no ethical basis or environmental concerns would still be looking at an investment in an industry which is going to crash. So, do we want to still be on board when it crashes? I think we need to break our connection with it much more urgently. So the question really is, what is the value in a university taking a step, taking a lead, giving a lead and saying we're going to divest from fossil fuels and give leadership in wider society? It's clear that that leadership is necessary. It's clear that campaigning spirit is necessary. This, Scotland and the UK are both weird countries. Not every country is like this. We got climate change legislation agreed with a very strong majority at Westminster and a unanimous support in the Scottish Parliament. Nobody voted against those world-leading climate change targets that Mr. Salmond likes to strut the world stage and talk about. Unanimous support for those ambitious targets and no policy change to actually deliver on them. We've missed every single annual target that's been set so far. So we've set these ambitious targets, and everybody, all the political parties want to be seen to have something positive to say on climate change. And yet we're not doing what's necessary on transport policy, on energy policy, on housing policy, on economic policy to actually make the change. So that campaigning leadership is still necessary, and institutions like this can help to give it. The last point I would make, though, is that if the University of Glasgow simply decided tomorrow at the stroke of a pen to divest, and that became just an issue that got very little attention, that wouldn't really be worth very much. It's the campaign for it, it's the demand for it, which is every bit as important as the outcome. If you were to achieve that outcome tomorrow and nobody noticed, that's not worth as much as the campaign for it. Because the real value of a university in a campaign like this is the awareness of people, not just who are going to be working in engineering or in public policy, but in every walk of life. People in a university are going to be the decision makers in every part of our society, in every walk of life, in every industry in the years to come. And exposing people to the arguments, exposing people to the campaigning objectives, to the ideas, is every bit as important as getting the outcome of getting a university to actually divest. So it's not just about getting that objective, it's creating a buzz about that idea and getting awareness on campus and in wider society around the university. So if you can help to achieve that, not just achieve that objective of divestment, but achieve an awareness of the reasons why it's important, I think you and other campaigners will have done something profoundly important for the university and for the way these arguments sit in our wider society. Thank you.